And so no, I go down again. Hello, everybody. I am I'm Gynocentric Awakening. I just got back a little while ago from doing a nice long walk. See, I collect cans and bottles for money until somebody pays me, get a job. This is what they have to do to earn money. That and playing nice video games. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check out Swagbucks. It's a good website. Sorry, it's a good app. So now that I am back at night, I thought I'd do a video on gynocentric masculinity. So what's that all about? This is actually inspired by discussions about whether or not you're like a real man if you're submissive. A lot of those discussions, about gynocentric masculinity, a lot of that is centered around making the man feel comfortable in his own skin, or trying to foster an environment where there's a lot more acceptance for men who submit to women or submissive to women or whatever. Because what they will try to do is they try to associate submission with weakness. And because there's like this masculinity issue in the culture, people are trying to define for others what their masculinity is. They don't realize that they're engaging in subjectivity. Like if you're saying, quote, real man, whatever, this is subjective bullshit. There's no objective definition of a real man. There's no objectivity when it comes to this stuff, because if you go from culture to culture, they're all different. There's the men in Moscow have a different masculinity than the men in Europe, who have a different masculinity than the men in other parts of the world. It all really just depends on your upbringing, what you're exposed to. So trying to whittle like everything about masculinity down to it's either you're this or you're not this or whatever. A lot of this, it's just psychological manipulation. A lot of this is personality disordered men, or men who have mental issues, wanting everybody to be like them. And so they try to create this subjective language and framework, and they act like they're the cool kids around the block, and everybody who's not a cool kid doesn't get a lollipop, or everyone who's not a cool kid gets shamed or whatever. I mean, it's funny that they think of themselves as masculine when a lot of the activities they do are frankly hilarious and ridiculous and don't actually add anything to a woman's life. For instance, doing acrobatics is fun for a competition or whatever, but if you are doing something that could expose yourself to serious injury, make it so that you can't support your family, like you can't work a job, or if you are constantly getting into fights with people and refusing to learn nonviolent communication skills, not only are you endangering yourself, you're endangering your family. And to me, as a person who has a gynocentric masculinity, I don't feel the need to constantly prove myself. If somebody gets into an altercation with me, which I'm not going to start, it will end with them in a hospital bed. It will end with the people at the judge going, dude, seriously, what the fuck did you do to this guy? Because I don't want to be like that, but it'll go there. And they have no idea what they're getting into with me. And the reason for that is because I come from a family of people who, we have psychotic temper tantrums. We have anger issues. And we have to constantly discipline ourselves and control ourselves. We're just doing the world a favor by not acting and being the worst parts of ourselves. It's a constant pressure and strain on our psychology. It is a long, unfortunately, bad tradition in my family. And so people, if they're stupid enough to go that far to pull out a knife or a gun or whatever, you better be ready to finish the job. That's all I'm going to say. You better be ready to finish it. But I think that there is this problem with a lot of men where they feel like they need to prove that they can take pain, or they need to prove that they're not afraid or whatever. They think the absence of fear is the proof of courage. No, courage is being afraid but doing shit anyways, because that's a natural human emotion that most of us have. That is what courage is. And so I kind of wanted to talk about what is gynocentric masculinity? Like, what does it mean to be masculine with under, what does it mean to be gynocentric and to be masculine? What does that look like? And the first part is it's taking calculated risks for the benefit of women and girls. In other words, you're using your courage to get results. So maybe it could involve going to a really nasty part of the country who and trying to figure out, read the temperature of the place, say, is this a safe place for the person to live? Is it not? It could just mean that when you have, let's say you have a problem with somebody who is threatening your woman or trying to do something, you kind of put yourself between whatever he is and your wife or whatever, and just kind of stuff like that. Um, so to me, that there's like there's always these calculated. There can be many kind of calculated risks, but there are risks that are done specifically for the benefit of the girls. In other words, there's not a risk that isn't calculated with that in mind. There's nothing that isn't factored into that. Um, like another thing is doing research, going and like talking to people who could be potentially hostile, could possibly hurt you or give you a really hard time or make your life miserable because you think that it's going to help somebody else. In other words, sacrificing your safety and your well-being to do it. And I've heard some of these discussions before in the feminist community. It's usually limited to talking about rape jokes and stuff. Like that's usually all I hear about. Um, I don't think I've really read or heard much more. If I haven't, I guess that's on me. Um, other part of gynocentric masculinity is that when you build strength, or you're learning martial arts, you're doing it solely for the women and the girls, not just yourself. So maybe you enjoy self-developing. Maybe you do get temporary highs off of beating people. I'm not going to say that it isn't a confidence builder to defeat someone using skill or power or whatever, but you're not doing this stuff just for you. So if somebody, if you're stronger, physically stronger, it lets other men know, oh, don't fuck with this guy. Don't fuck with him. Leave him and his family alone. He's not somebody I should prey upon. And then there's also when it comes to building strength, it's opening up job opportunities, as a man. So if you, whatever your situation is, if you're in a more male-led society, unfortunately, but you're also gynocentric, building up strength means that it doesn't, like, your job doesn't always have to involve deadly violence. Like, you don't have to have a gun with you everywhere you go. You don't have to you don't have to be enforcing law necessarily. You could just be a mover. Like, I had a family member who was employed for that work. They'd move furniture, like couches, whatever, in and out of people's homes. It's a good job, and it requires physical strength. As for, martial arts, maybe you could be an instructor. Martial arts doesn't, to me, like, I've heard somebody say once that violence isn't the same thing as self-defense. I think everyone's going to have a different perspective on that, but as when it comes to, if we're going to talk about masculinity, strength doesn't always have to be pit against other people in a violent context that leads to somebody's death, to the destruction of a person's livelihood or well-being, to elevate yourself, your ego, to feed it. That's not necessary. A lot of this stuff is related back to how can this benefit moms or grandma or my sister or my wife or my daughter or whatever. Like, what's this all about? So that's kind of where I think it factors in. And the next one is, I feel like gynocentric masculinity at its core is about it's about prioritizing responsibility and service to women over freedom. I have always viewed freedom, and especially absolute freedom, as a dangerous thing as a gynocentric man, because when you have too much free time on your hands, when you have too much freedom and not enough responsibility or service, it really can just bring out the worst in you. Especially if you're going on the internet or you're out at the wrong places interacting with other people who are on alcohol or drugs or whatever, or you're like or you like find time to get in a gang or whatever. Like, whoa, but it's mostly on the responsibility of the surface. So some examples of this, if your wife has health issues, if she needs to be carried around, it's an example of using your strength, but also being responsible. If she is pregnant, giving her time to rest, doing all the chores, taking care of things so that she has that time to rest and relax, and not leaning on her to do stuff that is not appropriate for the situation that individual is in. Or if she has health issues after childbirth, again, taking care of things and ensuring that she is comfortable and that she can recover, that matters. Using your strength and your energy and your motivation in ways that alleviate the burden on the other person, but especially your wife, girls, whatever. Then there is D, the self worth is derived from usefulness to the opposite sex. So, what I mean by this is, I mean, like, when we don't have women to serve, it affects our self worth. In other words, we don't have, women to take care of. We don't feel like we're providing some kind of service or doing something. There's no value in our lives. There's like an emptiness where meaning should be, where purpose should be. And that self-worth, that lack of self-worth can really eat away at a person with gynocentric masculinity, because part of the expression of that masculinity requires things like being responsible, serving, taking care of things, having appropriate back and forth input, being willing to accept constructive criticism, trying to be a better person. And also, this is something else that flies under the radar with gynocentric masculinity, is using your anger, violence, and aggression very specifically in a manner that doesn't harm women and girls in any way. It can only be defensive. In other words, if you've got a temper issue or an anger issue, there is no way that any of that ever factors into, it's never directed at the women and the girls. It's always directed at something else or someone else, or maybe, like a punching bag or something. But it's like, because some of us do have temper issues. Some of us have anger problems. Could have been the way you were treated growing up, could have been something that you went through. So, I mean, I think that what you focus your anger and your temper on gives it away, right? Like if you as a gynocentric man, and this is kind of one way you can tell, because I think I will have to talk about this later. If most of your anger and upset is directed at people who are mistreating women and girls, that's what I'm referring to. Like, your anger isn't directed at what women and girls are or aren't doing. It's directed at the people who are hurting them or causing problems for them or whatever. That's how you have, and if your expression of that anger or whatever is directed towards the people that are causing problems, or your anger, the anger that you have in your heart, and how you express that via your masculinity has to do with anybody who is making things harder, that's also part of it. It's part of an expression of that. Because anger, is associated with being masculine, which is weird because everybody feels angry. But, violence, just destruction, the ability to be destructive. A lot of this stuff we associate with the masculine. And so if you're going to adhere to this, if you do have sort of a gynocentric masculinity, you have to find a purpose for it, and you have to find a way to channel it. And I feel like the way gynocentric men channel their anger and their problems is not the same way people who are non-gynocentric do it. Because oftentimes I see, when it's non-gynocentric, it's usually blaming women and girls, trying to find some way to play the victim. It's always somebody else's fault. I mean, it's basically personality disordered shit. And so I really think that my personal opinion is that I mean, when it comes to this stuff, I used to be a man who was like, people tried to force their variant of masculinity onto me, and it didn't fit, because in order for non-gynocentric masculinity to fit the bill or to be imprinted upon somebody, they have to first have a non-gynocentric nature. I don't know when I'm going to get around to that video, but that's going to be coming up in the future. I hope I did this justice. I may have been meandering a bit at the end. I'm sorry about that. Well wishes towards a good night, and please stay safe, everyone. Take it easy and take care.